It's convention that the dominant allele is frequency, frequency dominant is P, the frequency of the recessive. It's convention. Does it matter?
If we changed it.
You changed it?
Like we just said it's wrong.
If you change it, you have to indicate clearly that you changed it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you have to write like I would have to see frequency of A equals Q, and I'd be like, okay, that's not really how you're supposed to do it, but he knows what he's doing. He's just not making a mistake. You know what I'm saying? Like you would, the difference. You can't be like, I can't be like, well, this is wrong. You're like, well, I meant to do that. Like, yeah, but you didn't show me that you meant to do that. Like, I can't tell if that was a typo, an error, or you just decided to flip P and Q. So stick with the convention.
So P is dominant.
P, yeah, is typically dominant. Let's make it even easier, right? When I give you alleles, whatever they are, say the alleles are R and T, right? We'll call the first one will be P and the second one's Q. Right? Just whatever the first one is.
Okay.
It's just convention.
Gotta be on your P's and Q's.
Ah! You know where that comes from?
Yeah, I do.
Where?
So P and Q kind of look the same, right? So if you're not meticulous about what a P is and what a Q is, then you're not meticulous about your life or what people are doing around you.
That's not what I heard.
But that's what
I heard P's and Q comes from pints and quarts. So bartenders, and bar servers and stuff had to make sure they kept track of the right number of pints and quarts. Peter, what's up?
You mentioned that this only works for like two allele system. What is the equation for
Extra credit opportunity. But we could derive it if you really wanted to. It would take a long time. But it would be like
say that.
P plus Q plus R equals 1, right? It would be something like that. Yeah. And then you'd have to go through and figure out all this. The math gets complicated quick. But you can look it up. I'm sure it exists. I'm sure people have done it. Extra credit. What's that? If you look, so this is the way extra credit works. You gotta look it up and then write a 1-page review. It shouldn't take that long. 10 minutes. By the way, thank you to everybody who came out on Saturday for the workshop at the Math Center. It was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was a good time. Cool. Other questions? No. Was it you had the question about the cystic fibrosis problem? Khan said, no, wait a second, in the cystic fibrosis problem, it said that 2 of your friends were carriers for cystic fibrosis. It was implied that nobody had cystic fibrosis. Does that make sense? Right? So that's the sort of thing that, like, on the exam, you can always ask me. You could be like, what's going on here? Like, okay, well, it's implied that nobody has cystic fibrosis. And you might have to know cystic fibrosis is a very, very serious condition. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't be going on a raft with desert island. Most people who have CF don't live that long. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So when we talk about the agents of microevolution,
Yes.
like all populations are subject to this, right?
Yes.
So how do we see the Harvey-Weinberg principle fully studied for some? Like why?
Excellent question. Remember, Harvey-Weinberg is talking about one gene. And organisms are mosaics. Know what a mosaic is? Guys know what mosaics are?
No. You really don't have to look at me like that, but I don't know.
Did you?
The fluid mosaic model, yeah, I forgot.
The fluid mosaic model? But you guys, this is a mosaic. Okay? Mosaics are artwork made up of small little tiles. Organisms are mosaics of their genes, right? Depending upon the organism, it could have a few hundred genes, it could have a few thousand, you have tens of thousands, you have hundreds of thousands of genes. But those genes are all working together to make the organism. Now, for any given specific gene, it may be evolving, but another gene may not. Okay? And so evolution is working on the gene, and some genes are just not being affected by it. This gets to the HLA versus the MN blood group thing that I mentioned before. So for example, in the MN blood group, evolution does not appear to be occurring, right? Between the observed and the expected, there's no difference, right? This gene, it's a protein on the surface of the red blood cell. It's not changing. It's very conserved, like it's not doing anything, right? There's no evolution occurring there, for whatever reason. But, totally different gene. HLA has to do with the human something. It's your immune system. And there's a really cool article, I have it down in the extra credit, you can read it down there and do it right on it, about how this is evolving. And the reason it's evolving is because it's pretty cool. It's very responsive to pathogens. And depending upon where your ancestors came from, you have different forms of this gene because evolution occurred differently there in response to those local pathogens. Does that make sense? Right? So if you came from an area that had a lot of, ringworm, then you've got one form of that. If you got an area that came from a lot of, yellow fever, you've got a different form of that. So this gene is under selection and is evolving where another one is not. Okay? Does that help? So we're mosaics. When we're talking about Hardy-Weinberg, we're talking about specific genes. We're not talking about entire individuals. All right? Okay. Other questions? None? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go through the different agents of microevolution. First one, mutation. Mutation is spontaneous, totally unpredictable. It is the source of all new alleles. As I mentioned before, mutation drives all evolution. All the variability that we see is the product of mutation. Now, if you remember from 211, most mutations either are very harmful or they don't do anything, right? Because of the redundancy in the genetic code, particularly at that third spot in the codon, if that changes, it has no effect on the protein. You guys follow me there? So don't forget, when we talk about genes, we're really talking about regions of DNA that code for proteins. That's really what we're talking about. So changes in that DNA could have no effect on the protein whatsoever. If it does have an effect, usually it's not good, right? Most mutations are detrimental, and they just lead to, oftentimes like a spontaneous abortion. Harmful to organisms. It's only a very small fraction of mutations that lead to a change that could be adaptive in some way, okay? It's only a very, very small fraction. Like you could imagine in the evolution of whales, the mutation that you know, it's kind of weird to think about, but whales lost their legs. The mutation that led to that, you had to be under the right conditions. It's like, I ain't got no legs. Like, oh, sorry, bud. It's like, I ain't got no legs. We're in the water now. Cool. Sweet. I don't need my legs. They just get in the way. They cause drag. All right, good. Okay. So there are a lot, you know, it's kind of weird to think about. You start thinking about, like, maybe some of these, like, freaky things that pop up, maybe that's what the future is going to look like. Right? Maybe if we all, because we all love, like, we spend our lives on keyboards, maybe polydactyly is going to become the next thing, right?
What is that?
6 fingers, right? I don't know, just a thought. But it's rare, it's rare. Many of the recessive alleles are forms of a gene that have been turned off, right? Like it no longer works and it's now recessive. Consequently, if you get 2 recessive alleles and you're homozygous recessive, that can be lethal. But they persist in the population because they're recessive, they're covered up by the dominant form and they're not expressed. When they're expressed, then natural selection can remove them from the population. But if they're not expressed, they just persist for a long period of time. They only show up, well, they often show up during inbreeding. You guys know about this, right? Because you're more likely to have the same deleterious recessive allele as somebody related to you. If you mate with somebody related to you, there's a greater chance your offspring will, you know, have that. Which is why we have evolved not to want to do that. And this is cross-cultural, like throughout the world. The vast majority of human societies, mating with close relatives is not good, right? It's frowned upon. Not that it doesn't happen, but it's frowned upon. Okay. Gene flow. So remember, gene flow, this is migration. This is alleles moving in and out of populations. This varies greatly depending upon the species, as you can imagine. Certain species are very, very sedentary. Other species move a lot. Sometimes you might be surprised at the species that move around a bunch. Plants move all over the place. With the help of animals, the wind, dandelions, my goodness, dandelions, right? Dandelions are everywhere. Why are dandelions everywhere? They blow in the wind, right? And they're carried all over the place. And when they're carried all over the place, they're carrying their genes with them. They're moving those genes, okay? Cool story. On the East Coast, there's a tree called Castanea dentata, the American chestnut. The eastern forest used to be full of these trees. Big, beautiful. They grow 100 feet tall. Gorgeous hardwood tree.